Today we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires. My idea for this show was to invite guests and get the conversation started, to take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. And we encourage our listeners to look within themselves to take decisive action to make a positive difference. Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires. I'm your host, Bill Myers, and we are continuing our series that we started on January 1 with Richard Brendan on healing and hope. And my guest today is her story is every bit healing and hope story. And I met her probably about a year ago and at Witherspoon Presbyterian Church in Indianapolis, Indiana, where she spoke. And I picked up a copy of her book as a result of that talk that she gave. It was, I won't do a spoiler on it, but I will show you the book just in case. The book is entitled Consider It Pure Joy. It is a fantastic read and a fantastic story. My guest today is author and attorney and activist, Jennifer Jones Austin. So I want to ask a few questions to set this up. How do you define the word joy? What do you associate with joy? Jennifer Jones Austin's story is both inspiring and compelling. When stricken with a deadly illness and battling for her life, she discovered that her life and purpose was much bigger than she ever dreamed. Let me tell you a little bit about Jennifer and her background. Jennifer Jones Austin, a fourth-generation leader of faith and social justice, child and family advocate, thought leader, public speaker, and nonprofit chief executive officer. Jennifer Jones Austin, Esquire, fights for equity. As CEO of the FPWA, she leads poverty fighting, policy, and advocacy efforts to strengthen and empower the disenfranchised and marginalized communities. Jennifer is a sought-after speaker who appears regularly on television and radio and at community events, faith gatherings, and professional convenings. She guest hosts the nationally syndicated radio program, Keeping It Real with Rev Al Sharpton, and the cable program Brooklyn Savvy. Jennifer was born and raised in New York City. And I am just so very thrilled to have her here today. She was with us earlier when we talked about racism and the social services, the government social services, and she provided quite a bit of information to let us know that systemic racism is alive and well in America. So at this time, I would like to introduce to you Jennifer Jones Austin. Jennifer, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Bill. When I received your invitation, I just filled up with joy. The opportunity to share my story, and especially in a moment in a time in our individual lives, in the lives of our, like, collectively speaking, the nation, where there's just a lot that we're all grappling with.
Yeah.
We need to center on healing and on hope and try to find some joy even in the midst of challenging times. So I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And I'm glad that you're able to tap right into the healing and hope, because we need that. There's a lot of hurt in our nation, in our world at this time, not only the pandemic, but, the divisiveness and the racism, and, there's a lot to deal with here. And so I think that it's appropriate that we start this year with optimism at the very least, and healing and hope is the right way to go. So Jennifer, I am going to now turn this over to you, and so you can sort of start this journey that you're going to lead us through.
Absolutely. So I'm going to begin by sharing that it was 11 years ago that I entered the new year with with what some would say is good reason to not be hopeful. I entered the new year, January 2010, having suffered my first bout with leukemia, and having to face the prospect of perhaps not surviving another bout with leukemia. And having to, and knowing that if the leukemia returned, it would return quickly and with a vengeance, and that it might very well be the case that I would not see 2011. So I know a little something about entering the new year, and not everything being all bells and whistles. And, we hear people often talk about, this new year is going to be my year. It's going to be filled with prosperity, and it's, everything is going to be exactly as I want it to be. I'm going to get that job. I'm going to get that car. I'm going to find new love. I'm going to, find reinvigorated love with someone that I, that I want to be with, whatever it may be.
Sure.
So we begin the year, very often feeling like we are 100% in control.
Right.
And in this moment, I think it's important to appreciate that that's not always how the new year begins. And so I entered 2021 remembering that it was in 2010 that I was facing the very real possibility of having a relapse with leukemia and not making it through the year. Give you a little bit of background.
Okay.
It was in September of 2009 that I learned I was sick. And it was kind of a crazy, way that it all went down. I woke up on a Friday morning with a flu-like fever. And I thought it was just that. I pressed on through the day, took some Tylenol to, to bring the fever down, and it just kept spiking. And then, tried to sleep it off at night, and kept waking up drenched in sweat, in my own sweat, because it was my body sweating, trying to bring the fever down, trying to, take care of itself. And then by that Saturday morning, after having been admonished repeatedly by my husband and by my mother, I went to the hospital, to the ER, sat in the ER for hours, and ultimately was triaged and was told that I had a virus. The doctors in the ER told me to take some Advil and go home and sleep it off. They said it would be about 48 to 72 hours before I began feeling better. So I should just go home and sleep it off. Well, here's what happened. The doctor said I should. That's what I did. And Sunday came. There was really no change in my condition. Monday came. Still no change until that afternoon, Monday afternoon, when after awakening from sleep, a nap in the middle of the day because I was fighting this flu or this virus, I woke up and I could not see. Everything was white. I literally could not see. That's when I realized this is not your ordinary flu-like fever. It's not your run-of-the-mill virus. Something greater is wrong. Something more significant is the problem. And so I called my physician, my primary physician, and she told me to come on in. And when I got to her, she took one look at me and said, "You're in bad shape. You need to go right away to the hospital via ambulance." And I got to the hospital, and they began performing a battery of tests. They admitted me. And by that Wednesday, I learned I had leukemia. I had acute myeloid leukemia. And the doctors told me that most people who get leukemia undergo chemotherapy. They're inconvenienced for about 6 weeks. And then they get back to living the life that they've known, the lives they've known. And so I thought, this wasn't on my agenda. But, 6 weeks, that's not a lot of time.
Sure.
And I'll just press on and I'll be fine. That was Wednesday. By that Friday, what I'm about to tell you, I only know because I've been told. I was comatose. The doctors put me into a coma, and they intubated me. They put a tube down my throat. What was happening was that the leukemia, which is a blood cancer, had actually begun moving through my body, and it entered my lungs, and my lungs shut down. I could no longer breathe on my own. The doctors intubated me to help me to breathe. They put me in a coma because my body was still heating up. They put me in a bed of ice, and they told my husband that I was going to die. They told my husband that I had a 99% chance of death.
Wow.
And that I would likely die that weekend. They didn't think that chemo would work. They conferred with the number one specialist in the city, and she said, well, just go on and try. And she prescribed a cocktail of chemotherapy. They administered it, and lo and behold, it worked. That's why I'm still here.
Right.
And I will tell you, as a person of great faith, that there was a whole lot of praying going on as well. And so I believe, very strongly in the Bible's teachings that faith without works is dead. And I think that there was a lot of praying coupled with the doctors going to work. And I survived that weekend, only to learn when I came out of my coma that the doctors that believed that because of the type of cancer that I had, the rarity of the acute myeloid leukemia, I suffered a broken chromosome. I had a defunct blood and bone marrow system. And the only way that I would survive long term was if I had a bone marrow transplant. And so we went through a period of time, several weeks, getting us through the holidays and then to January, beginning of a new year, where I was in great search, desperate search for a bone marrow donor, for a bone marrow transplant to cure me of the disease.
Wow. So let me back up just a second, because now we're into the new year. So when exactly did these symptoms initially start? Because this seems like it was a pretty compressed period of time where the floor just fell out.
I love that. The floor fell out, the bottom fell out. I remember the Thursday before the fever hit, not feeling quite right, but just thinking maybe I'm getting sick. It's the end of September, and I'm one of those people who has long been susceptible to change of season, colds. You move from the fall to the winter to the spring to the summer to the fall, and on comes a cold.
Right. Sure.
And so I was used to that, and that's what I believed what was happening. But it was something more severe. And so, from feeling sick to first feeling just a tinge of sickness and then waking up with a fever on that Friday morning, by the very next week, my husband was being told that I was going to die that weekend.
My goodness. Incredible. We just don't know what life has in store for us. And I'm just reminded of, it's not so much what happens, it's what you do with what happens and how we respond in moments like that.
Right.
And there are many people, of course, suffering right now, of course, during with COVID and are being leveled.
Yes.
And so, I continue to pray for them. I was having a conversation with the pastor, Winterborn Harrison Jones, Dr. Winterborn Harrison Jones, over at Witherspoon Presbyterian Church in Indianapolis. And, I had shared with him that my reluctance to get onto Facebook right now, because I find myself spending 30, 40 minutes just clicking the heart button and saying my condolences and my deepest sympathy. And I am praying for you over and over and to the point where I just have to log out. I've got to walk away because I have been consumed with that activity for 6 months. And it's just a constant reminder. And there's only so much you can walk through before you need to kind of catch your breath and recharge the battery, just to log in once again and do the same thing over and over.
Absolutely. One of the things that I found very early on during the COVID pandemic was, I was feeling that weight as well. Especially, I'm here in New York City. And as you
so am I now, right?
I love it.
I just moved to New York.
I see the Empire State Building. I'm loving it. But like being here in New York City, we were very early on, like kind of the epicenter for the pandemic here in this country. We took the greatest hit initially. and being a person of color, and having many friends who are of color and friends who come from all walks of life,
Mm-hmm.
I too found myself on Facebook just scrolling, and it was like every time I moved on to the next page, there was another person who'd passed away,
Oh yeah.
or a family member who was gravely ill, and all tied to COVID, and it was a lot. But here's the interesting thing: what I began to realize was my journey with cancer was giving me a perspective to try to help support others dealing in this very uncertain moment. The fact that when I had cancer, and then when I ultimately received the transplant, which anybody interested in reading the book, where I could say a little bit more about it, was like, I mean, my family and I were on this like kind of like amazing race journey to try to secure a transplant donor before the disease returned. And it was just like the doctors say, it was an epic journey. That's actually why I wrote the book. But and part of it, the reason I wrote the book was to help people appreciate that when you're going through something that is so challenging, is in many ways seems catastrophic and is catastrophic. Your whole life is turned upside down.
Right.
Like what you said earlier, Bill, how you approach it, how you embrace it, has everything to do with how you get through and how you come out of it. So I began to realize when I was on Facebook, Instagram, and other places and spaces, that I had a perspective that could very well help people in this moment of greatest challenge and struggle, trying to center as loved ones were being lost, or were succumbing to illness, or as people were facing the illness themselves, or the uncertainty with respect to job loss, or their children now not being in school, and just all of the trauma, all of the drama and the trauma. My experience of having to fight for my life and not knowing whether I would live, and literally walking the streets of New York City wearing a mask when nobody else had to, fearful that I might contract something that would take me out because my immune system was compromised.
Right.
I had a perspective.
Right, sure.
That could help others to get through.
Yeah.
And so I actually then started going on to Facebook all the more, because I realized that I had something to give.
That's incredible. And that, this story, there are so many elements to your story in this journey. And you're right. You are absolutely being prepared for a moment such as this to offer something to others, some hope and that sort of thing. We're going to take a break right now, and we'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires. We're doing our series on healing and hope with my guest, Jennifer Jones Austin, and we'll be right back in just one moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talent, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, BillMyersInspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation. We're back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and we're doing our series on healing and hope with my guest today, Jennifer Jones Austin. And let me flash this book again, because shameless promotion, but it ain't no shame in my game. This is an awesome book, and everybody needs to go out and get this thing. It's a wonderful journey. Consider It Pure Joy by Jennifer Jones Austin. Jennifer, there's a little detail here, because you are an attorney, and you had made mention that when you were in finishing up law school, that you had your sights set on the big cushy corporate gig. We're going to make millions and millions of dollars and represent Exxon or whoever. Now, but then something changed. And so I just want to backtrack, because I think this is a critical little piece that is certainly a part of your journey. And I think that it is worth.
Indeed.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So one of the things that I've come to appreciate is you really are a product of your environment. I once had a therapist say to me that there are three types of people in the world, and especially when it comes to trying to deal with an issue or a situation. Mm-hmm. He said the first kind or first type of people are those who deny that there's a problem. The second type of people are because she said it's all about imprinting, like what you see in your household is what you become. First type of people, like if they bring a problem from their home or whatever, they say, nope, there's no problem here. There's nothing wrong with me. She said the second type of people say, yeah, that is a problem. That is a problem. That's me, but I'm not changing. And she said the third type of people are those who say, yes, there's a problem, and I want to do something about it. And she said that it is the third person that you want to work, that you can definitely work with. The second person, you may have some leeway, but that first type, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because I realize that my imprinting is very, very much a part of who I am, both in terms of how I move through the world, and then how I deal with problems and I deal with situations. And I grew up in a household with parents who were more in that third category. And so that's kind of who I am. Well, you asked about you brought up kind of the whole thing about me thinking I was going into the corporate world. The imprinting in my life was such that I was taught to believe that you should live your passion. You should pursue, whatever your calling in life is, whatever your purpose in life is. And that if you are not in pursuit of your purpose, you may be doing good things, but you'll never feel fulfilled. You'll never feel whole.
Yes.
And so I went to law school, not necessarily wanting to be a lawyer, but when I was there, I was like, well, what do people do? They come out of law school, and most often they try to make lots and lots of money. And that's what I'm going to try to do. And it was in my second year of law school that I learned about the experience of children who are abused and neglected and are, severely and often permanently traumatized. And it was as though God was speaking to me and saying, I brought this to your attention because I want you to go to work. I want you to work on behalf of my vulnerable children. And so I'll never forget, in my second year of law school, feeling as though God was speaking to me. And at the time I was dating this guy, and we'd been dating for about 3 years, and we were talking about getting married. He was in business school, so he was going to be a businessman, and I was going to be, a corporate lawyer. We were going to make oobs and oobs and oobs, gobs and gobs and gobs of money. And I'll never forget calling him up and telling him that I believed that God wanted me to help, serve and protect, save his children, his vulnerable children, the ones who are abused and neglected, the ones whose parents do not have enough resources to put food on the table at night and to keep them safe and warm. Mm-hmm. I called him up and I told him, I didn't know what type of reaction I would get. And I'll never forget him saying to me, this guy is saying, well, then you need to do that. And I was like, oh, I'm glad he understands what I'm saying. And he said, you definitely need to do it. He said, because if you don't, you're going to be miserable. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is such a great guy. Like, he sees me, he hears me, he believes in me, and he understands. And then when he went on, he said, if you're miserable, then I'm going to be miserable, and I don't intend to live a miserable life. And that was, goodness, that was, I guess now 31 years ago, and I married him. So it all worked out, right? It all worked out.
That's awesome.
So I went on and I began working in child advocacy, working on behalf of vulnerable children, working in child welfare, working with children whose parents, for whatever reasons had physically, emotionally, mentally abused them or neglected them. Very often I found that these were parents who themselves had been abused and neglected, parents who were struggling to make ends meet, had experienced sometimes issues with substance usage, and just found themselves in a bad way. That opened up my mind, my heart, to appreciate that I needed to work on behalf of vulnerable children and their families. And I have to tell you that it's been now, goodness, a career that spans about 30 years. Mm-hmm. And it's been all about serving and protecting and uplifting the needs of the most vulnerable children and their families. And I've been blessed to work at the city level, the state level, and at the national level doing this work. And I've been able to achieve some great wins on behalf of vulnerable children and their families. And
that's awesome.
Because the book tells you, as God would have it, there was a reason. I'm just going to say I'm so thankful that I listened to God 30 some odd years ago, because there was purpose in him sending me to work on behalf of the vulnerable children.
Right. That's awesome. Okay. So now that we got that, it's so important, because your commitment and where your passions lie have so much to do with this story. And so now where we was you were in need of a bone marrow transplant. So I'm going to let's pick up from there, because now I just wanted to make sure that we hit this other little piece, because it's so important, because it's God definitely is all over this story.
All over it. So here's what happened. I come out of the coma. I'm told I need a bone marrow transplant. I'm told that the cancer is at bay, if you will. But they'll be able to keep it at bay with some consolidation chemotherapy treatments. But at a certain point in time, they're going to no longer be effective. Because I have a broken chromosome, it rendered my blood and bone marrow system defective, and that meant that the cancer was likely going to come back. Mm-hmm. And I did not have an immune system to fight it. They said I needed a new blood and bone marrow system. They told me that I needed a donor. They said, you need someone with similar genetic typing. Not blood typing, but similar genetic typing, same genes, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so they said, like a brother or sister, somebody like, same mom, same dad. I have 3 brother and sisters, 1 brother, 2 sisters. We thought that one of them would be a perfect match because we have the same mom and the same dad. So they all were instantly tested. And when the results came back, we learned that they didn't match me. They actually matched each other, but they didn't match me, which was like crazy. It was insane. Like, how could that be? So we then began learning about the National Bone Marrow Registry. It's a registry that today has more than 9 million people in it. People who have, at one point or another, over the course of the last 20, 30 years, have signed up to be a donor, a blood and bone marrow donor for someone in need of a transplant. And that registry stays active with those people. And should they have genetic typing that is similar to someone who's in need of a transplant, they are called up to see if they're willing to be a transplant donor for that person. It may not be the person that they joined for, but somebody else with similar typing. So the doctor said, we'll take a look at the registry and see if there's a transplant donor in there for you. They combed that registry, and they had a hard time finding just one match for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard to believe that, with as many people as were in that registry, there wasn't a good match for me.
How many people were in that database?
At that time, there were 8 million people.
Wow.
8 million people. Well, here's what we found out. And this is something, that may be of interest to you, given your racial background.
Mm-hmm.
What we found was that persons of African descent have a very hard time finding a bone marrow donor because you need someone with similar genetic typing. And because of the great diaspora that began with slavery, and that continues today, and it's a blessing in many respects with interracial coupling. It's very hard to find somebody with who is of African descent whose genes match up significantly with another person of African descent. Now, if you're from the continent, immediately from the continent of Africa, you've been on the continent of Africa for the last 400 years, your family, your ancestors, you don't have this issue. But if you're here if you are a person who, because of slavery and other, has a gene pool that now is mixed with persons of European descent, or other, you are challenged. And so that's what happened in my case. My husband turned to the doctors and said, well, why don't we conduct bone marrow drives? You may have heard about them before. They're drives that are held where people are asked to consider being a donor for somebody in need of a transplant. In the last several years, they've changed the process for registering people, but it used to be that, you would be approached and then they'd ask to swab your mouth to get some of your saliva, which would give you, they would then run that and they get a sense of your DNA and your genetic typing. And if it looked like you might match, you'd be called for some more tests. And if those proved to be the case where you were a match, then you would be asked to be a transplant donor for somebody in need of a transplant. And this is a transplant for leukemia, other blood cancers, and increasingly sickle cell anemia, which we know mainly affects persons of color, Black persons. And so my husband said to the doctors, let's conduct drives. And the doctors actually told him not to. They said, let's just focus on her living out her last days as peacefully as possible. Because they thought that maybe at best we'd have a drive that would bring 100, 200 people.
Right.
And if there were already 8 million people in the registry, then what difference was 100, 200 going to make? It'd be like they call it a needle in the haystack.
Right, sure.
I don't know how old school that term is, right? I don't hear young people saying that anymore. I may be dating myself.
We'll do a whole show on the needle in the haystack.
Right. But the good news is that he didn't respond to them and say yes in the manner that they were suggesting. He said, you know what? We're going to do some drives because we're not going to let her die without at least trying to find her a donor.
Yeah.
So he and my family and friends commenced drives across the nation. And what happened, Bill, was that literally in less than 3 months, they began in December. They went through December, January, and they got through a part of February. So we're talking about, it was less than 13, 12 weeks. They had, through their efforts, more than 13,000 people join the registry.
13,000.
13,000. Wow. Largest number of people ever added in 1 year by one family's efforts, and the largest number of persons of color ever added in 1 year. More than 13,000 people. And the good news, considered pure joy, was that people who'd been looking for donors, people of African descent and other who were looking for donors,
Mm-hmm.
began learning that people who joined the registry to be a match for me were actually matches for them. And so people who'd long been in need of a donor began learning that they had the transplant donor they needed to be cured of leukemia or some other blood cancer or sickle cell anemia.
Now, just for clarity, the 13,000 people that participated in this bone marrow drive were they just in New York City, or how did that?
They were across the nation. They were in the Caribbean. We even had a drive in Africa. We went globe trotting, if you will.
Wow.
A lot of attention was paid to places where Black persons congregate. So churches, colleges, HBCUs, sororities and fraternities, because we needed people of color to join. But we also had, Caucasians join, and we had persons who were not of African descent. We had Asians join. We had people of Hispanic origins join. And so what was beautiful in all this was that people of different races and ethnicities were learning that there were matches for them. And to date, we have better than 100 people who we know of who received matches, life-saving cures, bone marrow transplants from people who joined the registry to be a match for me. And that's why I talk about joy.
Wow.
Because what we were seeing was that even though I was suffering, and even though my life hung in the balance, there was purpose in my suffering. I had a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old at the time. They're now 18 and 23 respectively. And the gift, the joy that we were experiencing in them understanding and appreciating that even though I was suffering and I might not live, there was something good that was coming of my journey with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, I didn't want to die.
Sure.
But it gave me a sense of comfort and joy. And it gave me a sense of, how do I best say this? Peace. That my children would know that we didn't give up without fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And that even if we fought and we didn't win, there was some value. There was something that was gained.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. And the fact that effort wound up being a blessing to so many people who were just like yourself in need. So now out of that, did you come up with the match for yourself?
So in the book, I write about how I would pray to God and I would thank him for what was happening. But then I'd also say, Lord, I don't want to be a martyr. Like, I don't have to go down like that, right? Can we just get one match for me? And here's the beauty of it. I never got a bone marrow transplant. All of that effort, I never got a bone marrow transplant. And even today, my husband and I, I've served on board. I've served on the National Bone Marrow Registry's board. I've served on the board of the ICLA de Silva Foundation, which was the bone marrow recruitment organization that helped us, canvass the nation to find a donor. My husband presently serves as the chair of that board. I am a spokesperson and a big fundraiser for them. What happened was we never got that donor, but we did get something for me. We got a very special gift for me. And I think it has everything to do with years before the Lord having spoken to me and saying, I want you to work, to save, to serve, to protect my vulnerable children.
Okay. See, that's the cliffhanger. We got to hold right there. We got to hold right there. So yeah, this is, it's truly amazing. This has so much dimension, and it affects so many people that rallied around your husband's efforts and all the efforts that went internationally, all around the world to save Jennifer. I mean, there's something incredible about the idea and that level of commitment. And in spite of the doctor's advice or advisement to not go there, and I would imagine that's probably because they have experienced times where people put all their hopes in that effort and it just didn't, you know what I mean? So that quality of life thing, let's just chill out and make the best of what we have left here type thing. So that's an incredible journey. So we're going to prepare for this next break here, and then we'll be back because I'm going to, it's the drum roll. I'll do it. So you are listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and we're doing a series now in the month of January on healing and hope and today's guest is the author, attorney, advocate, and just all around wonderful human being, Jennifer Jones Austin. We'll be back in just one moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talent, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, BillMyersInspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation. We're back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and we are here with my guest today, Jennifer Jones Austin, and that just to be able to say that we're here today with Jennifer Jones Austin is in and of itself pretty awesome to be able to say.
Thank you.
The author, you are so welcome. She is the author of a wonderful book called Consider It Pure Joy, and I know that this book is available on Amazon.com, is probably several other sources. And we will get through that and get back to that in just a minute, because I do think it's a great read and something that is very inspiring and very timely. It is very timely. And so, okay, so Jennifer, here we go.
Okay.
Now, so we did the bone marrow drive, thousands and thousands from all around the world, and we were matching 100 people have been blessed by this effort, and you did not come up with a match, and so here's where we are. How do what
and
do you
do? And what my husband and I kept on saying, you only need one. You only need one. And so, we were in a race against time because, as I said, the doctor said that the consolidation chemotherapy to keep the cancer at bay was going to eventually become ineffective. My body would learn, to adapt to the chemotherapy, and, it just wouldn't be effective anymore. Kind of like when people say you can't take antibiotics, but for so long, because the body then says, I've seen this.
Right.
It's rendered ineffective. So we we passed from 2009 into the new year. I don't have a transplant prospect. I am at times growing weary, but at the same time, I am feeling blessed because I'm seeing, what is happening and all the joy. I'm going to tell you, let me just pause and tell you the joy that comes, the blessing that comes sometimes when you are going through something and others know about it. So often what happens when we are facing something very challenging is we tend to hold it. We tend to not want others to know. We keep it to ourselves. What I learned by having a disease that required that the public know, because I needed the public to help me to try to find a donor, was that I drew so much strength. I drew so much courage. I didn't feel that I was alone, suffering all by myself, because people were showing me love at every turn, trying to help me get through this disease. And so that's what's happening. And we're still not learning that there's a match for me. And then one day the doctors call me and they say, we believe we have something else. And they told me what it was. And I thought, wow, really? Like modern day medicine? Like I had never thought that I would be like, kind of one of these people who were caught up in something that was so relatively new.
Right.
But that, they saw hope for me in me being part of something relatively new. I got a transplant. It was not a bone marrow transplant. It was a cord blood transplant. I received the stem cells in the cord blood of 2 babies. Now, the cord blood that I'm talking about is the very cord blood that often is thrown in the trash, more often than not, when a baby is born. So when the baby's born and they cut the umbilical cord blood, doctors most often just toss it into the trash. But they found that cord blood contains stem cells. And stem cells can create a new blood and bone marrow system. I received the stem cells of 2 babies. Now here's the cliffhanger, or the way that it all comes together.
Right.
The beauty of this was that when I was like very young and I felt God spoke to me and said, I want you to work, to serve, save, protect my most vulnerable children. I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful that I had clarity of mind to hear him, to lean in, to listen, and to respond. And then to have the blessing for so many years of working to serve, save, protect God's children, his vulnerable children.
Oh, yeah.
Well, years later, when I was at death's door and I needed someone to save me, we looked to my siblings who should have been a match, and they weren't a match, did not match me at all. We turned to the bone marrow registry with better than 8 million people in it, and not one person in that registry was a match for me. My husband, and as I said, my family conducted bone marrow donor drives, better than 200 drives, bringing more than 13,000 people to the registry. And not one person was a match for me. And that's because God had something just for me. I received the cord blood, as I said, of 2 babies, the stem cells in the cord blood of 2 babies. These 2 babies were 2 babies born in a public hospital here in New York City. 2 African-American baby boys born in a public hospital in New York City. Most people who deliver in public hospitals don't have health insurance that takes them to a private hospital. Most often they are people who are low income, who may be challenged. I received life-saving stem cells from the cord blood of 2 African-American baby boys born in a public hospital. When I think about that, I'm always just overtaken with joy, because what I realize is that I gave my life to saving, serving, and protecting God's most vulnerable children. And in this nation, who are the most vulnerable? Our African American babies, and in particular, our African American baby boys. And when I needed someone to save me, God provided. He sent 2 African American baby boys.
You know, it still gives me chills. It really does. And it's so powerful, a powerful testament to the mysterious workings of God and what happens when we walk the path. I mean, we don't know. We can never know and see the end of the story. You know, Martin Luther King, what is it? You know, just take the first step, you know.
Well, you know, Bill, I tell people all the time that you have to live in pursuit of purpose. You have to live every day believing that there's a reason you're here. I've heard many people say in this COVID moment, you know, coming into 2021, well, we survived COVID, you know, and I've even heard some people foolishly say, we did what we were supposed to do. And those who have perished didn't do what they were supposed to do. Oh. No, not at all. This is what I believe. We're still here, not because of our own doing per se, but we're all still here. Those of us who get to continue living on this earth in 2021, on January 8th, we're still here because we have purpose. And what our responsibility is in this moment is to, we may know what that purpose is, we may not, but just keep working in pursuit of it, trying to do the best that you can do. Be the good person you need to be. Live with a sense of joy that you're still here, optimism and hope, and a belief that you have something to contribute, no matter your situation, no matter your circumstance.
Right.
You have purpose.
Yeah, and oftentimes it is our vulnerabilities and our brushes at the edge, that are the very thing that give us renewed purpose and are the very things. Because you said something before, the whole notion of not how when we are in a bad way, a lot of times we sort of clamp down and we don't reach out. And I would argue that is precisely the time to yell to the highest mountain. That is the time when you need folks to companion you and to open up options. And, 2 heads are better than one. 13, 14, 20,000 heads are better than one. I mean, when everybody's working to lift one another up, I think is very, very powerful. And
if for no other reason than, when we hold stuff, we stress about it.
Right.
And it works against our physical and our emotional and our mental well-being. So just sharing allows you to release and to let go.
Yeah. So Jennifer, we are coming up here, and I just want to, as we sort of get ready to wrap this show up, first of all, it is a pleasure as always.
You blessed me.
Oh, you have blessed me. Again, the name of this book.
Thank you.
Is Consider It Pure Joy. And we know that it is available on Amazon. And I would imagine if you go to Jennifer Jones Austin, .com?
Yes, you can. Yep, you can order it there.
Okay.
And there are a few bookstores, but if you send me an email, I'll give you, I love to talk to people.
All right.
Go to jenniferjonesaustin.com and send me an email there. And, if you want to share your story, you need some encouragement.
That is awesome. Well, I hope that folks have been blessed with your story today, as I am hearing it once again. It is amazing. And I just want to encourage you to press on, my dear, and keep lifting up these children. So again, you've been listening to Bill Myers Inspires with my guest, Jennifer Jones Austin. I thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to next week's conversation. Again, we're staying on health, our healing, and hope. Thank you for listening. Ta-ta. Thank you for spending your afternoon right here with us at Bill Myers Inspires. Remember, we're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Inspired Choices Network. Remember to take time this week to take a breath and look within yourself and figure out how you can make a positive difference in this world. Spread the word, and we'll see you here next Friday. Have a wonderful week.